Thank you. Good morning. The first time I sat down to watch the show The Good Place back in September 2016, I asked my husband what it was about, and he said, "I'm not sure, but Kristen Bell stars in it. I'll give any show with Kristen Bell a try." After watching it, I said to my husband, "This is not your typical plot line." For those of you who may not have had the pleasure of watching The Good Place, it is a fantasy comedy that focuses on Eleanor Shellstrop, played by Kristen Bell, who arrives in the afterlife and is welcomed by Michael, played by Ted Danson, to the good place, a highly selective, heaven-like utopia that Michael designed as a reward for her righteous life. However, Eleanor quickly realizes that she was sent there by mistake, and she must hide her morally imperfect behavior while trying to become a better and more ethical person so she can stay in the good place instead of going to the show's version of hell. The show has received critical acclaim for its writing, acting, originality, and set designs. But what really makes it stand out is its exploration of ethics and philosophy. In listening to an interview with the show's creator, Mike Schur, it's fun to realize that the basic premise for the show, that there is someone or some system keeping track of everyone's behavior to determine where they go in the afterlife, comes from his basic desire that everyone should follow the rules of society. Nothing bugs Mike Schur more than seeing someone drive on the shoulder of the road past everyone when there's a traffic jam, or go through the express checkout line with 18 items when the limit is 15, with no negative consequences to the person breaking the rule. Despite growing up in a culture with a lot of Christian influences, I didn't spend much time worrying about going to hell if I behaved badly. Nor have I thought much about heaven. Maybe this was because by the time I came along, my parents decided that their children could decide for themselves what they wanted to believe about God and religion. Unlike my brothers, I got to skip Sunday school. I was very privileged to have two devoted parents who really thought how best to raise their kids. By example and through discussion, they drilled into my brothers and I that we should be honest, responsible, kind, and generous. In other words, we should be good, not because we would get any reward in heaven or elsewhere. Thinking back on it, they probably did on occasion use the tool of guilt and withholding their approval, but they did not threaten that bad things would happen if we didn't behave. We had to do our chores around the house because we were part of the family, and we should do our part. Our allowance was not tied to the performance of chores. For a long time, I've been intrigued with what motivates people to act well, to be cooperative, to help others. I'm impressed that my parents could raise 3 kids without the use of heaven and hell to coerce us into good behavior. We didn't use that concept with our daughter, but I do remember suggesting the concept of karma to my daughter once when she was teasing our dog Bonsai. I told her, "Watch out, you may come back as a dog and have a master who teases you as you are teasing Bonsai." I don't think she believed it, and I'm not sure I did, though I do find the notion of karma intriguing. But the comment seemed to have had an effect. The teasing stopped, and it was then that I began to appreciate what a handy parental control tool the notion of heaven and hell is. Beyond acting in an ethical matter, there is also the question of actively working to help others. What motivates people to volunteer or help others without being asked? For some reason, I was one of those idealistic kids, and I'm not sure where that came from. I recall that I had a poster in my room with John F. Kennedy's quote, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." I don't remember how that poster got in my room, but I looked at it for many years. I suspect my motivation to volunteer was influenced by my parents' actions. Both were in helping professions. Both were teachers, and later my mom became a counselor. My mom did a lot of community work, and my dad did his part by caring for us kids while she went out to do this work. I recall both my parents got involved in the early civil rights movement. I found out many years later when visiting a family friend in Australia, that apparently my dad took her to a Black Panthers meeting back in the 1960s. I'm not sure how accurate this story is, but I do recall as a kid going to some kind of meeting about civil rights. But really, I don't remember them talking much about their volunteer work. They just did it. I found out about their good works from other people or because I directly asked them about it. Lately, because I'm recently retired, I've been wrestling with how much of my time should be spent on good works versus just enjoying life now that I'm so lucky not to have to work 40 hours per week. And with a grown child, I am now free of caregiving duties. Some volunteer work I enjoy, but some I really dread. And now I no longer have the socially acceptable excuses of I have to work or I have to take care of my family, which were once so handy for getting out of specific volunteer work that I didn't enjoy. Without the responsibilities of work and caregiving, the show The Good Place stimulates me to wonder how much doing good is good enough. And one of the philosophers the show references is someone who has really gotten me thinking since I heard him on the Ezra Klein podcast. Peter Singer is an Australian moral philosopher who is on the faculty at Princeton University and the University of Melbourne. He specializes in applied ethics. He is known for his 1975 book, Animal Liberation, in which he argues in favor of veganism. He also wrote an influential book called The Life You Can Save: How to Do Your Part to End World Poverty. This book has spawned the effective altruism movement. In Peter Singer's newest book, The Most Good You Can Do: How Effective Altruism is Changing Ideas About Living Ethically, he talks about people who've really taken to heart the notion of living ethically. These are people who choose careers that allow them to earn a lot of money and then they give much of it away. Others choose careers so they can spend most of their time helping the most vulnerable people possible. And still others donate parts of their body, for example, a kidney, to someone they don't even know to help save a life. His book got me wondering about the ethics of spending money on going to plays and concerts, buying books, and the really big indulgence, which is also not good for the environment, traveling by car or by plane. Singer's book has a chart of recommended giving levels. Interestingly, his chart is progressive. The more you earn, the greater the amount and the percentage of giving he suggests. For myself, to meet Peter Singer's guideline, I will need to double the amount of charitable giving. This did make me gulp when I first read where we fell on his chart. My husband and I must decide which indulgences we must forego. This year, because our plans to visit our daughter in Amsterdam got postponed due to the pandemic, it will be easier to give more. But how will it feel when we must give up some of our travel wishes in order to give more to charity? I'm hoping that, if I'm following the maxim of careful and effective giving, I will feel good about giving more. I am persuaded by the argument that doing good, either by charitable giving or giving of your time and talents, can be transformational. Buddha said, set your heart on doing good. Do it over and over again, and you will be filled with joy. As Winston Churchill said, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. What I wrestle with, because there's no time-giving chart to refer to, is how much time to spend on enjoyable pursuits like traveling or going to plays or watching TV versus doing volunteer work. What I've noticed about doing volunteer work is that I'm enriched by the experience of helping others. I enjoy interacting with other volunteers, and I'm gratified when I see the impact of our work. However, I've recently gotten invited to weekly Zoom calls with two groups of activists. One is the Orange County Emergency Response Coalition, and the other is Housing as a Human Rights, OC. These calls can be inspiring because they're full of activists working directly with the most vulnerable people of Orange County, those who are without homes, immigrants, detainees, and those who are food or housing insecure. The discussions cover a myriad of issues, and everything feels so important to work on. When I first started these calls, it was like drinking water from a fire hydrant. I kept trying to help with advocacy efforts, but I was never done. I would wake up at night thinking I should get up and do more. And sometimes I would because I couldn't get back to sleep thinking of all the injustice and inequity in Orange County. And then, because of the lack of sleep and hours focused on advocacy work where you don't really see an immediate return on your work, I would get grumpy. And sometimes I would even start to wonder why others aren't doing as much as me. But, as my grandfather used to say, comparisons are odious. I think that if you can't give with joy, then you're probably not in the right space for giving. As one minister once said in a sermon, I don't want you to give until it hurts. I want you to give until it feels good. I think the answer lies in Buddha's middle way. Recall that Buddha grew up as a prince, swimming in overindulgence. As a young person, he sought enlightenment through the rejection of all worldly comforts, even starving himself. Eventually, a young girl came by and gave him food. From that experience, he learned that there was no benefit in depriving himself of food. That just meant his body became weak and he could not become enlightened. Likewise, I gained insight from a nurse who practices Buddhism. She observed that Buddha wanted us to have compassion for others suffering, but there was not CNN and 24-hour news of the entire world when Buddha was around. The suffering we can now be exposed to is just too much. How do we moderate? So here are the guidelines that I've developed for myself when it comes to giving. I'm not suggesting anyone else follow these guidelines. This is for everyone to decide for themselves. I will follow Peter Singer's guidance for charitable giving, increasing the amount of my fiscal donations, and I will do research to assess how the spending would make the most difference. In terms of how I spend my time, my circles of impact will be making sure that my family is taken care of, housed, fed, clothed, healthy, and happy to the extent that I can have control over this. Doing my share for the organizations I belong to, such as Tapestry. Supporting candidates I think will lead to good government. Working on one or two issues in some depth so that I have impact. So far, my focus has been on homelessness and women's reproductive rights. I intend to give until it feels good, and when it starts to feel otherwise, I will back off. My husband came up with an idea that though we're retired, we should make the weekends a no chore zone, so we'll know when it's the weekend. I like this idea. It provides an automatic structure for taking a break from doing good works. We're also trying to reserve one weekday morning or afternoon to go to the beach, ride bikes, or hike, something to get outside. And I will not feel guilty for spending time enjoying arts and culture, or traveling, or having a good meal, or a good time with family and friends. Rather, I will choose to view these activities as food for my soul. To me, these activities are akin to taking the Sabbath. It gives a needed break to the work of the soul. I've heard recently someone say that the purpose of the soul is to love and to create. I've heard many definitions of the soul, and none has impacted me so much as this definition of its purpose: to love and to create. For me, this definition put in my mind the image of mothers and fathers. Parents create life and they love and nurture their children. Other images that came to my mind were nurses and family caregivers who take care of others in a loving way, and artists who create art, music, and story. And soul, if our souls are like parents in terms of their purpose, it makes sense to me that our souls need to be cared for and nourished. Like the guidelines when you got on an airplane, parents should put on the oxygen mask on themselves first before putting it on their child. Parents can't care for their children if they don't first care for themselves. I believe we love best and are most creative when we are well rested, feeling safe, and well nourished physically, mentally, and spiritually. So if, like in the show The Good Place, there is some system keeping track of all the good we do, I trust that its algorithm is taking into account that for us to do the most good in the world, We need to take care of that part of us that gives us the strength, energy, and creativity to make the world a better place. We need the joy of community, laughter, music, and story to nourish our souls so that we may give and help others from a place of loving. Ultimately, I don't think it's about keeping track of all the good we do. It's like my parents' philosophy about doing chores. We should do them because we're part of the family. We do good because we're part of a community, and it feels good to do our part. And that is reason enough. Namaste.